Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoi video. It's been quite a while since I've made one of these. I just mentioned it to Ryan, who's co-hosting this video with me. And I'm super excited to analyze the GHB 22-23 Season 2 with Ryan. We'll be diving into most of the stuff, as in we'll cover everything from battle tactics to missions to rules. Ryan's here with his tournament experience, and I'm mostly here with my what should we call it, theory crafting, I guess. And we've kind of fused those two strengths together into this video. Ryan, thanks again for co-hosting this with me. Are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, even for me, it's a little bit early to be talking, not to be talking about it, but I feel like I might change some opinions over the course of the coming months. So, take everything with a grain of salt from two people's perspective, but we do spend a lot of time thinking about these things and the game, and hopefully we can bring some new insights or perspectives into the new GHB.
Yeah, so just as Ryan mentioned, to be clear, this is still quite early in the season, even though the seasons usually don't last that long anymore anyway. The point with this video is kind of to give you guys a head start on your competitive games rather than completely figure out the entire GHB, because that would take much longer than what we've had so far, I think. But Ryan,
Sure.
you've managed to squeeze in quite a lot of games already, right?
Yeah, I've played 13 with KO and 2 with Skaven in this GHB. And then obviously, since we have some overlap with half of the battle tactics and grand strategies, I've had tons of games in the last GHB. So, yeah, and obviously some of those games are at tournaments. So, I got to see what some competitive players are doing. And then, of course, non-tournament players as well. So
Yeah.
I have a decent sense for where we're headed with all this.
All right, let's dive right in then. So we'll cover what's new, the new rules mostly. Then we'll move on to battalions. We'll tackle grand strategies and battle tactics. Some of those you will know from the previous season. We'll cover the new enhancements, both the new artifacts as the new aspects. And then we'll go over each and every mission. The missions especially is going to be very interesting, I think, because with Ryan's input, we've kind of focused on what mission is better to take first turn in and what mission is better to take second turn in, for example. So that should be very interesting. Okay, so what's new? Well, I think the biggest thing, if you didn't know already, we've left the Galician veterans behind mostly. The wording is still there in one battalion, but the rule is gone. So no longer will you be punished for bringing Galician veterans. Now it's all about the champions. And Galician champions are heroes with the wound characteristic of less than 10, that do not have a mount, and that are not unique. So, for example, all your small heroes will get it for Lumneth. That is quite a lot of heroes, actually. What do you think about this rule? Do you feel, Ryan, that they should have allowed mounts, for example?
If they did, we might end up seeing some of what we had with the bounty hunter situation last time, where the kind of idea was for these regular infantry guys to be the ones getting the bounty hunters, but most of the time it was fast, mobile cavalry type units. And I feel like in a similar way, as we'll talk about in a second, with the command abilities and the swarm bodyguard stuff and all that, or the heroic actions, I mean. What you're going to be seeing is that most of these GCs just aren't enough of a damage dealer, the ones that exist in the world, if they're not on a mount, to be able to make a big difference here. But as soon as you put them on mounts, I think it would have opened up a whole extra group of guys that probably weren't what they originally intended for this like lore and the flavor of this season.
Yeah. Yeah, from that kind of perspective, I feel it's better to be safe than sorry, because I think they did not want the Galician veterans to turn out as they did. And I like that with this more careful approach that they're still shifting the game a little bit, but it's not as impactful as you would think at first sight. So one of the things that is quite impactful, though, is that your Galician champions cannot be picked as a target for attacks made with missile weapons, while they are within 1 inch of any friendly battle line units. That last part is quite important. What I love about this is that that you're once again rewarded for bringing battle line units, because we've had half a year of us getting punished for having battle line units, and now it's finally good to bring them again. I really love this rule. At first I thought it would kind of nullify certain units or even army builds, but now honestly I wouldn't be opposed to having this as a general rule in the rule set altogether. What do you think about it?
Yeah, with the new battalion for Galician champions that we'll get into, or Galician veterans that we'll get into, that gives the bonds of battle thing, I think we are seeing this beta testing as we've been talking about for a while. This kind of real world beta testing, where I think it's quite possible what you just said is going to come true. The Galician champions will stay a thing in 4th edition, and that the no shoot rule, which does make them more worth their points. A couple things that come to mind that are worth pointing out. One is the battle line units don't. The assumption is, of course, it's going to be like a lookout sir kind of thing, or a bodyguard unit where they have to be small models or like chaff. And it can be even a behemoth that's been turned into a battle line, like a Arcanaut frigate, or like a Magmadroth, or you name it, a Tree Lord. It can be a unit that's been turned into a battle line, which is pretty cool. Obviously, they won't count as, some of the kind of units to benefit from the heroic actions and stuff, maybe, but still pretty cool. And then the other thing I noticed is that the shooting, the sniping off units within one, these small GCs, I don't see it happen in games as much as people, I think it happens. And I play a lot of shooting builds too. So I'm definitely, given the opportunity to see this play out. And a lot of times, I think if you're being honest, even though the support pieces are super crucial for a lot of strategies, if they don't have anything to buff in the first place, it doesn't really do much either. So in my opinion, it's better to get rid of the big unit that they're trying to buff if you can. If they're tanky as hell, like a Vanguard unit or something like that, then you probably are going to be fighting an uphill battle. But in general, I don't know that this protection is necessarily like amazing. It's just a nice thing that could definitely survive, to your point, in the next edition, because it's not like broken at all.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that point of view comes from you playing armies that where you usually have at least the one shooting unit that you do have is usually strong enough to take out an entire unit on their own, while there are certain armies or even builds where the shooting units are so small or so are just not as impactful as a big unit that they are quite good at taking out small heroes for objectives or for battle tactics, I mean. And that they would not do the trick if you need to kill them, if you need to use them on an entire unit, like let's say of pigs, Iron Jaw pigs.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's really just going to come down to the army versus the army at the end of the day. But it's definitely a good buff. I'm not trying to crap on that at all. But I just don't see it happen. Even when I played Tzeentch, where my heroes could be sniped super easily, I only saw it in 2 games out of like 5 tournaments worth of stuff, and then all the supporting games I did to prepare for them. I only saw it happen like in 2 games where someone really went hard on trying to take out my support heroes. So I don't know. And that was before the GC thing happened. So I don't know. That's even me playing defense on this.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Okay, cool. But, also, if you're taking second turn now, there is no longer the option to pick an objective that is overconquered by Galician veterans, for example. But now, if you take the second turn in the battle round, at the start of your hero phase, you can pick one Galician champion on the battlefield to carry out 2 different heroic actions in that phase instead of one, which is quite nice, and I thought it would be super impactful, and in my games so far it really hasn't been that great, honestly.
Yeah, I think some of the newer books have heroic actions built in.
That's fair.
Fire Slayers has a heroic action. A number of newer books. Yeah. Does Skaven have a heroic actions built in?
Don't they have this sub-faction or sub-allegiance where they get an extra heroic action? Or is that rule that they get to do an heroic action with every hero or something? There is something heroic action related, right?
There probably is. There's a lot going on in that book,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, regardless, Slaves has got a lot going on. That's a new book, and you are seeing more of this being a thing. Obviously, the new Beasts of Chaos one doesn't really matter for this because the Beasts of Chaos rituals of ruin or whatever are technically not even really heroic actions.
Yeah.
They're their own thing. But in any case, that helps those armies. I would say, I agree with you. It hasn't made a huge impact on anything. I think maybe more interesting is that the smooth brain thing they would have done switching from season 1 to season 2, since we switched Galician veterans out for Galician champions. What they might have done is just kept proving grounds and then done basically what we see in one of those battle tactic or battle or what am I trying to say, battle plans, where a Galician champion could be the only one who's contesting an objective. If they had kept that, that would have been really rough, I think. But so this is actually less swingy of a thing for sure. And a lot of people forget that it's only in their hero phase that they get to do this. It's not both turns in that battle round once it's been decided that they'll go second.
Yeah.
So just to point that out, a lot of people have been getting that wrong in my games.
Yeah. It usually does give you the chance to get an extra command point because that's probably the always the one that you'll pick as to have as extra. Yeah. But you can also choose to do the 2 new heroic actions back to back because you will need to do them back to back to gain the full advantage of both of these. So the first one is strike at the opening and your Galician champion fights during the hero phase. So it's kind of a Daughters of Cain kind of ability. But then you get strike loss for the rest of the turn. So you'll get to fight in the hero phase, but then when you fight in the combat phase, you'll strike loss for sure. And then if you get to do 2 heroic actions, you can choose to make an attack with their sworn bodyguard, which we will get into later, but it's basically a unit that's attached to them due to a battalion, and they also get to fight, but then also get strike lost. Yeah. Have you ever used this in a game?
No. First off, I've been taking low drop armies, and second, I've never seen anyone use it. Thus far. It just seems like, I mean, yes, people need to become more accustomed to it. And this isn't a command ability we're talking about, you could maybe compare this with the command ability from last season that literally I never saw used once. Though I even forget. It was like a strike last thing, right?
Yeah.
I think this will happen more often. Not that it's a command ability, but keep in mind that to get that second heroic action for most armies, to get the sworn bodyguard, it means a few things. One, you're going to have had to have taken the battalion itself to get the sworn bodyguard ability. 2, it's going to have to be applicable to your guy, the champion, the hero. They're going to have to be in combat or within combat's range, and also the bodyguard unit. And furthermore, in order to get 2 heroic actions, you're going to have gone second that turn. So the stars aligning for this is still pretty low to get that second one.
Yeah, the first game I played with the new GHB as Lumineth, I took all the battalions just to try them out. I honestly think it's not that bad to not get a 1-drop, but we'll get into that later. And I really tried to get this off with my Enlightener and her 10 Blade Lords. It's just so difficult, and it is kind of what you said earlier in the video, where there's not that many Galician champions that you want to get into combats. They're fine, but it's not as if their damage is that impactful that you really need to get them in combat, and just to have the chance to use this second heroic action.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with rules that are just kind of there. If a situation arises, is kind of like Hail Mary kind of thing. I'm okay with that. We've already got the game's complicated enough as it is. Having a thing that just rewards players who are aware of these extra little opportunities and the rare chance that they happen, I'm okay with that. I know Vince from Warhammer Weekly would probably argue that it should be made simpler and we shouldn't have this bloat in the game, but I'm okay with it. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to the spell and the realm command then. Both are quite good in my opinion. They're very cool. Compared to the other realm command that we had before, where you kind of had to outnumber them and then the opponents had to strike loss effect or something. It was super weird. I've never seen it used ever. I can see both of these getting used. In the first game I played, I kept trying to get Grinding Teeth of Galay off, but it's so short range and it also affects your unit, so it's quite dangerous actually. I like it a lot. So Grinding Teeth of Galay is a spell that has a casting value of 6 and a range of 12. If successfully cast, pick one objective within range and within line of sight, I should say. Then roll a dice for each unit within 6 inches of that objective. On a 4+, that unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. That is massive, or that can be massive at least. Now there's a few things to note here. Rules as written, if you are standing on that objective, it is not visible, right? Or did they FAQ that?
Yeah, they FAQ'd it.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's the way it should be. That it always should have been.
Good. Because that seemed just super silly to me.
Yeah.
Have you used this?
It's come up in one game out of the 15. It is really strong. I think something else that's just really worth pointing out is that most of the players I know use the 6-inch radius objective circle markers on the board. And if you're that type of person, you got to keep in mind that the objective is a point in space. It is an infinitely small point at the exact place on the board. It is not the 6-inch objective marker, which means the range of this, if you don't want to be hit by it, is 6 inches outside of that objective marker. So if you want to think about it relative to the objective marker, you have to be standing on or closer to 6 inches away from the edge of the objective marker. Does that make sense what I mean?
Not to me. I mean, you just don't stand on the 6-inch circle, right?
Yeah. So a lot of people think of the objective as the circle itself.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought that was what you meant, but it seems so obvious that it wasn't. But okay, yeah, I understand what you mean now. Yeah.
A lot of people get confused and start associating, because that, for functional purposes, that is what matters, is that you're standing on the circle, not that you're within 6 inches of an infinitely small point in the middle of that circle.
Yeah.
And so this is just saying, if you're thinking, I've got a range of 12. No, you've got a range of 6 to the edge of the circle.
Yes.
If you want to think about it that way, if you're used to playing with the circles. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want to get hit, obviously you can be standing on the objective and you're clearly within range. But I think it's strong for sure. If all the battle plans end up being as centrally located as a lot of people are saying, that everything's just going to be a fight in the middle of the board, then there's going to be a lot of units that are going to get hit by this. And with that casting value, it's pretty reasonable for someone to get it off.
Yeah.
So
I keep envisioning this with the Techless Bomb, and then adding this on top of that. It's so disgusting.
Yeah. You got to have someone within range of the objective, and you're not on it.
I know. But still, if the stars align, goddamn.
there is one thing that's worth pointing out, though, is that Tzeentch can add 9 inches to the range. So that would with one of their command traits. They do have a way of getting this, or of course with Spell Portal. So
yeah, how would this work with Spellsinger from Sylvaneth?
Because it's from the tree, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's only for lore in their own lore.
Oh yeah. No, I don't think so.
They definitely changed it so it can't be endless spells anymore. That's
no endless spells, but I think you can throw out every other spell, because the Warsong Revenant can still throw his own spell through it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, then it'd be measuring from the thing, but the trees have to be set up a certain distance outside of objectives, outside of 3.
Yeah.
So then maybe it would help. It would definitely give you some more reach, I think. But,
so park a tree next to an objective and go.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Okay. Realm Command. Or do you have anything else to add to the Grinding Teeth?
No, that's fine.
Realm Command, no retreat, no surrender. At the start of the combat phase, if a friendly unit that is not a hero or a monster did not charge in the same turn, and that is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, It cannot make a pile-in move in that phase, but you add 1 to the attack characteristic of melee weapons used by that unit until the end of the phase. So basically they get +1 attack but no pile-in. In short.
Yeah.
If they're already in combat.
Yeah, excluding mounts, which
Yes.
obviously for a lot of the big hitting units it's going to be like kind of a downside. I still haven't seen this used either, but it is nice, especially if you're a unit that has like really good range.
Wardens?
Yes, sure. Or Skaven. Skaven units that come in tins have extra inch for every tin that they have, so they're basically all within range. And adding 1 to attack's characteristic of something like Storm Vermin or something would be pretty strong.
I think if I remember correctly from your Math Hammer videos, +1 attack is always better than +1 to hit, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Unless your to hit is super bad. If it's a 6 going to a 5, then it would be pretty solid. But it decreases as you get further along in the thing. But kind of. But it's hard to explain. We'll do it later in another video. But what's it called? So the +1 to attack, it is especially good if you happen to have damage, like higher than 1 damage, 2 or more on your unit. That's particularly good because then you're getting a multiplier on something that was already there. Yeah. If you already had a high attacks characteristic, then it's having less of an impact.
Yeah.
So your ideal unit is going to be it has to be a non-hero monster, something with lots of guys that can make the reach without piling in, and that already have at least a damage characteristic of 2. And ideally, if you want to see the max improvement, then they would only have an attack characteristic of 1, which means that you're getting a super big buff, 100% boost to your output.
Yeah,
and
it's quite nice.
Yeah, super nice.
Are you thinking of any specific units right now?
Well, I mean, we just mentioned ones with extra range. I think that's definitely a thing that you'd be thinking about. And of course, anything that procs on mortal wounds is also going to really like having more attack because it just gives you another chance to proc something.
I'm just thinking Blade Lords.
Yeah. Oh, with their perfect strike?
God damn.
Yeah, that would be good. What's their range? 2 inch?
2, yeah, so that's not bad, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not bad as long as they can get in there. And then dealing mortal wounds like that is pretty awesome. So.
I mean, if they're in Shining Company and they're fighting 2 ranks of 5 anyway, then they'll always be within range. If you made a good charge move, you're in. At the start of the combat phase, you proc this ability instead of the all-out attack. They get to do 20 mortal wounds on a 2+ rather than a 10, so that is quite impressive.
Oh yeah, that's a lot.
Okay, cool. So that's the new stuff. Well, almost, because obviously we've got 3 new battalions, all the other ones are gone. So yay, no more bounty hunters. I chose not to do a conclusion slide here, but actually an in general slide in advance, because I felt that was important here, just to let everyone know that in my opinion, neither of these 3 battalions are as impactful or game-breaking as the Bounty Hunter battalion is, or even if we wouldn't have had Bounty Hunters, Expert Conquerors was also way more impactful than any of these. There's one that allows you to take the Sworn Bodyguard, so you get to do the extra heroic action that we mentioned before. There's one that allows you to still shoot Galician champions. And then there's Galician Veterans. And if you're already having post-traumatic stress now, it's very simple. It allows you to fight in 2 ranks, which was a basic rule in the previous season, and now you get it from a battalion, right?
Yeah. Worth pointing out is that the type of unit that goes into all 3 of these, except for the commander type, that goes into the Galician Command, the 1 Galician champion you get, all of the other types of units are labeled as quote-unquote infantry, which is defined as a unit with a wounds characteristic of 4 or less that's not leader, artillery, or behemoth, and does not have mounts. Now, in the picture, the icon they use in the GHB, it's of a guy with a bow. And this is understandable because, well, one of them is Galician sharpshooters. But for anyone that hasn't quite pieced it together, a lot of people have, this means that even though the Galician sharpshooters requires you to put 3 of the guys in there, you have to have no more, no less than 3 different units. that qualify as infantry, they don't all have to be shooters.
Yeah.
So you can put one big shooter unit in there and then two just cheap chaff units, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Of course, those two chaff units don't have a shooting profile, so they don't get to benefit from the ability, but then that helps you fulfill all three of those. Granted, like you mentioned earlier, you're dropped by doing so. And the same thing is true for the sworn bodyguard that goes in the Galician command. Keep in mind that again that heroic action was the strike at the opening thing is going to affect those sworn bodyguard units. And what's it called? Does it affect their? Oh wait, they can't have mounts because they have to be infantry without mounts.
Yeah.
So implicitly, what I was saying earlier about standing next to your battle line and getting the not being able to shoot rule from a Galician champion, if you do take an army that's full of tree lords or whatever, rune sons on Magmadross, they're not going to get to benefit from any of these battalions, or the only benefit they're going to be adding, other than just being battle line in the army when they weren't previously, is that now they can protect some GCs from shooting. So these are the kind of little things that I feel like sometimes go missed with these things.
Definitely.
In general, I'm not seeing a whole lot of these things going on. I don't know if I've even played against an army that took sharpshooters. Again, at least in a competitive sense, high drops or low drops is really what people are mainly shooting for still. Maybe it's just because we're getting used to the new edition, but unless an army already needs to be 1 million drops in order to fit in the artifacts or command traits or not command traits, but enhancements that they want, I just don't see these being that popular at the end of the day.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not as big on the 1 drop anymore as I was before. I still think it's useful to lower your drops a little bit, obviously, but I don't know whether it's as important as before. I think some of these, well, actually just one. I think the sharpshooters can be quite good, but then we kind of get into that same discussion that we had before, where you kind of advocate for not shooting the small heroes and just focus on the big ones. And I go, well, but my 2 units of 10 sentinels kind of still want to shoot small heroes sometimes if we're not in heal on. So there is that. But let's go over each and every one of them. We've kind of covered most of it already, so we'll race through this. So the infantry unit in this battalion becomes a sworn bodyguard. In the combat phase, it can fight right after the Galician champion in this battalion, as long as it is wholly within 6 inches and has not yet fought in that phase. So this kind of ability we see coming up more in a lot of books and prints that GW does. Soulblight has this as a standard rule. If you fight with a small hero on foot, you can still activate an infantry unit next to it to fight right after you. So you basically have 2 activations. For armies like Lumineth, that would mean that you get triple the activation. So you get to fight with a champion, the bodyguard unit, and then another unit. So that is quite cool as well. Is it worth it? I don't think so. In my eyes, you would never take this unless you have a fighter hero, and what fighter hero is, as you mentioned before, is on foot, has less than 10 wounds, and etc. etc.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you that this is the direction that the books are going, and that Soulblight rule you're referring to, if I'm not mistaken, was added in the White Dwarf update for Vampire Lords.
Yeah, it was.
So even that is a more recent version of that, which doesn't even have a new book. So I think this is definitely where GW is taking the game, is where the combat order priority and all that stuff is being messed with a little bit more, which is cool, I guess. And the other thing is, like I said before, I kind of feel like this is more of one of those, like, if you ever do get one of your Galician champions in combat, then maybe you're going to get to use this extra thing. It's just kind of giving them a little more value, so that you would never, and previously you would never choose for them to fight unless you knew they were going to die and you're just trying to get the attacks in. Because if there were 2 units you could choose between and the other unit had more bodies, you'd probably want to protect that unit. Those heroes just don't put that much out. But if now you know both of them get to fight, it's kind of like back in Fantasy when you used to have, I don't remember the exact rules, but I know you used to be able to bury one of your square-based heroes inside a unit.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe they all got to fight as a block. I don't know if that was true at the time, but certainly that's kind of how this feels, is that you're the heroes with this unit and they're fighting with them as though they were part of the unit. And that's flavor wise, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think usually with the small heroes, their attacks are so insignificant compared to the units that they're running alongside of. I think GW really wants to kind of enforce us or force us to fight with the heroes first, because it just doesn't make sense to fight with your small heroes last, right? The cool thing about Warhammer is that you get a lot of heroes fighting mano a mano. And I think they really want to enforce the idea of fighting with your hero and not keep saving them for last when it's basically a wet towel fight.
Sure.
Yeah. I do wonder if it was, for example, as we've been talking about before, if this would become a basic rule, that seems like such a pile-on on other rules that it's not impactful enough to me that would become a basic rule. But as a battalion, it is interesting. I don't think I'd ever take it, but it's interesting.
I don't see it becoming a basic rule if they've already printed war scrolls that have this ability on them, and they're for the coming, like, they're in current 3rd edition books. For example, Slaves to Darkness has this rule kind of in a number of places.
Yeah.
It's on a war scroll, and I don't like that invalidates that war scroll basically if they make a new rule that just everyone has of that quality. The one exception I will say is the Chaos Knights and Slaves to Darkness have the fighting in 2 ranks rule, which is really cool because it's a cavalry unit. But as a caveat to that unit, the cavalry unit isn't eligible to be in Galician Veterans Battalion, which we'll get to here, which is just the same fighting in 2 ranks rule. So it's not actually overriding, if they do keep it in the game, it's not overriding what's on award. So yeah, I think this is just going to be for this edition here.
Yeah. Okay, so Galician sharpshooters then. We've talked about this multiple times by now. So missile attacks made by units in this battalion are not prevented from targeting enemy Galician champions that are within 1 inch of enemy battle line units. So it requires 3 infantry units, and just as Ryan said, it doesn't need to be filled with ranged units per se. It is the only way now to reliably snipe champions without magic. I think it's quite good. Is it better than taking a 1-drop in certain builds? I think yes. Is it better than taking 1-drop in most builds? Probably no. I can see myself taking this in certain builds for sure, though. The thing is, it increases your drops to at least 4, so 3 infantry units and then maybe the 1-drop. And by that time, is it still worth trying to get your drops as low as 4, or do you just go for more battalions? And the thing with more than this battalion is that all the other battalions are not that impressive. I feel. I think if there was another battalion that was pretty cool to take, and you know that you're going to be behind on drops anyway, you could just say fuck it and we'll go for a lot of drops and just cool battalions. And I think that kind of weighs more into the whole comparison between sharpshooters and 1-drop than anything else.
Yeah, there, like we were talking about earlier, there are definitely armies that like to just say screw it with the number of drops, and because they need command traits or other enhancements, and as such, yeah, I feel like this is not a bad one if you have shooting units, to pop in there. There are other things like, so like a Stormcast type unit that's not worried about drops, or an army would be one with strikes, because they could always deep strike those long strikes after, the first turn.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, they're drops, whatever. But one of the reasons you want to control whether you go first or second is so that, well, you can prepare for that double turn maybe, or you can make sure that you get all of your alpha off. But if your stuff's already off the board anyway, and you have a 30-inch range like those guys do, then who cares? You drop them in, and there you go, and then you can snipe out the heroes, and you're good to go. So I think it really just depends on the build. I think Skaven's going to do this for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're taking a small amount of ranged units that's not as geared towards killing entire units and more focused on dealing, let's say, 5 wounds reliably, then definitely take sharpshooters. I ran them on. I ran my 2x10 sentinels in this battalion, and it was quite cool taking out all the Zinj casters. I was really worried for my lists if I wasn't able to do that.
This was against Michael, I assume.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. So the veterans. This used to be just a general rule in Season 1. So when fighting melee, models within half an inch of a friendly model that's within half an inch of an enemy model can fight without using the range on their weapons. Basically, it allows you to fight in an extra rank without using your range. This is only ever useful if your unit still has a 1 inch range on their weapons. You at least need 2 infantry units for this, up to a maximum of 4. I feel with the new tomes, this rule gets less and less important because they're just getting better at giving more range to units. Do you agree?
It's mainly for units with really big bases. So that kind of those big guys, like, I don't know if they just updated the trolls to have enough range, but if you take a big block of trolls, I could see. Yeah, that too. The Bulgors, although they might be able to have enough range now. I don't think it's a bad thing that it exists. I think what they might do with this is just add it to the core battalions that exist in 4th edition.
Oh yeah.
You know? And then, like you said, we have more options that are meaningful.
Yeah.
So
I think if they want this to be a thing, just increase the range on the units that you want to fight into ranks.
Yeah.
Personally, if they have the big bases, they're already getting punished because usually those units are taken in 3s. They're already getting punished for going to a unit size of 6. So I wouldn't mind giving them a bit more range in that regard. But hey, okay. So that was that for the battalions. We're moving on to grand strategies here. We'll go over each and every one of them quite quickly, and then we'll form a conclusion there. So the first one is Tame the Land. This one is familiar to the people that have played in Season 1. Control all objectives wholly outside your territory. I do not like this one at all. It is very unreliable. Everyone's gunning for objectives all the time. So this is probably the highest risk one, in my opinion. I would definitely avoid taking this. How do you feel about this?
Yeah. So the first question, we kind of addressed this in the slides that we have for the missions, but how many objectives are wholly outside your territory can vary from mission to mission.
Yeah.
In addition, those are going to be the harder ones to take because your opponent might be trying to defend what they already have if they have a castle build anyway, which is a good chunk of the builds out there. I agree with you. This is just asking too much of you. As a caveat here, before we finish talking or we get all the way through grand strategies, in team type tournaments, which I know aren't necessarily popular in all parts of the world, and the vast majority of players aren't competing in these, you often can't repeat grand strategies, or sometimes you can only do them twice, which means if you have access to your book grand strategies, those will kick in as more needed then, or if you don't, then you're going to have to find some grand strategies here that might not be optimal if you're playing by yourself, but if you're on a team, you'll end up having to take a second look at. So keep in mind that even if it's bad, this one is, I would say, still bad, even in that context. But even if it's bad, it might still be chosen if you are kind of forced out of taking your top choice.
Yeah, and if you're super, super good, because I don't really see this happening a whole lot, even if you're forced to take this one. So good luck if you have to.
Right.
Okay, the next one is defend what's ours, have no enemy units wholly within your territory. Again, quite unreliable because it is so easy to just get into your opponent's zone with, just an inch of your base. Especially now, that's kind of a spoiler for the artifacts here. But with the with the new traits, the new aspects of Gur, you can give your heroes a teleport called Tunnel Master. So if you know that your opponent has Defend What's Ours, that is a very easy way to ruin or to take 3 victory points away from them.
Yeah, it's a lot of people think on paper that it's the opposite of take what's theirs, because it's kind of framed that way.
Yeah.
But this is because it says no enemy units within your territory, unless your territory is particularly small and you have a build that can just keep them out the whole time. Remember, even just one pile in can be enough to ruin this. That said, this is still chosen decently often by players. I wouldn't say it's a super competitive choice, but sometimes they feel like this is still somehow more reliable than the other options. So, yeah, it's you see it from time to time, but yeah, I agree. I don't like taking this one.
What I think would be cool is that certain grand strategies that are quite hard compared to others can already be achieved in the middle of the game and not at the end of the game. Let's say, for example, that this says starting from round 3, if you have no enemy units during one of the rounds in your enemy units in your territory, you complete this grand strategy. That would be way cooler, because then you're actually defending it and your opponent also has to mind it for 3 more turns. I'm not sure how balanced that would be, but that would allow GW to have some wiggle room with how difficult their strategies are to complete, right?
Yeah. Or if they did something that was like I don't know, rounding up, you have to have more units in your territory than they have in your territory. Yeah. Something like that. Make it a little harder, because obviously if you're building, you just sit there and don't move and make them come to you. That's not like equally balanced with take what's theirs. It's not like a complement to that. So you'd have to make it harder, but this much harder, I think, is just asking too much.
Yeah. Okay, then take what's theirs, have more friendly than enemy units in your opponent's territory. I mentioned this as okayish, but you think this is the best one, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely book grand strategies that are better than this. And I will go and say in previous recordings we've done, I was mentioning that our local scene here in the Netherlands and kind of Europe in general often doesn't allow battle tactics and grand strategies, but now that they've nerfed the daughters ones, people are opening up to it. And I can tell you right now that Worlds and all of the tournaments coming up here in the coming few months, they have allowed them. So in relation to the fact that we can use books, maybe this isn't as strong as it once was, but you still see it a lot. And it really encourages alpha builds, like you're kind of saying here, decent for fast and aggressive army builds. And of course, with any amount of teleporting. Obviously, it wants you to play MSU on some level, because then you have the chance of having just higher number of units, instead of playing like 3 big models or something. Then you're really challenged with making sure they don't die and taking out more of their units from their territory. So, but I still take this one regularly. So, yeah.
I think it's definitely okay. I personally like one of the new ones now, but that's mainly because I'm looking at it from a Luneth perspective, and I'm bringing a lot of champions anyway. So let's get into those new ones. So stake a claim, have 3 or more Galician champions wholly within enemy territory. This one is crazy in my eyes. Galician champions will be killed anyway, and it really requires a specific build. Having 3 champions in a list in itself is quite a lot already. So then having those survive the entire battle and then in enemy territory, that is asking quite a lot of your army build.
Yeah, and most GCs aren't fast because they don't have mounts. So even if they can teleport, they usually have to do so outside of 9. They're probably not going to survive. Now, the funny thing is, you said 3 GCs is a lot. Now, it is a lot. What's it called? I agree, it can be a lot. But there's another one that you like on here. In theory, require you to take even more GC.
Yeah.
So if you do think, I think that's kind of the counter argument against the one you'll be making a little bit later. But I agree. And some armies just can't make that many GCs and fit everything they want in their list. So it depends on the army. But
Yeah. I think this would be much more achievable if it said have 3 Galician champions wholly outside of your territory.
sure.
That would make much more sense to me.
Some enemy territory is actually quite small and really easy to defend.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Survivor's Instinct. Have your Galician champion general contest an enemy objective wholly outside your territory. So this is interesting. I don't think I made an error here, but it only says contest, right?
I've got it right here. Objective. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I thought when I was, because I don't have the book, so I have it all from the internet, from screenshots and all that stuff. But contesting is not that difficult, to be honest, especially if you have a teleport that you can just take on any Galician champion now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does allow a lot of counterplay, I think. But then a contest an enemy objective wholly outside your territory. There's a lot of missions with multiple objectives, so I don't really see this being that incredibly difficult. It just forces you to have some mobile general, and they need to survive. I think that's the biggest one. They need to survive.
Yeah. And those teleports oftentimes aren't going to work on just one turn's worth of. You can't just teleport and expect to be contesting that objective, because as long as they've got the models right, like one model in the center 9 inches out, unless he hits that charge, he's not going to be on it.
Yeah.
So
and they need to survive that turn if you're not taking the second turn, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I do think this is one of the easier of the new ones, but it's still asking a lot.
Yeah.
And remember, it has to be your general. So let me just double check the wording on this. The model picked to be your general. So that means if you had a War Master for some reason that wasn't unique, which I don't think exists, but even if it did, or you had an army like Slanesh where you can have multiple generals, I don't know if they count as picked to be your general. I think you still have to pick one that receives the command trait. So it means that one person's really a high target. It's definitely painting a target.
Yeah. Okay, and then the one that I like, the day is ours. Have more Galician champions from your starting army on the battlefield than your opponent does. So you made a valid point that it requires you to take maybe even more than 3 champions. I would say yes, unless, and that's where my argument for sharpshooters comes in once again, unless you have sharpshooters. Then if I'm taking, let's say in Lumineth I'm taking 3 champions, I don't really need to keep those alive as much as I just need to kill your champions. And if I'm bringing 20 sentinels in sharpshooters, for example, I'm quite confident that I can take out those champions, and that I'll gain something from taking them out before as well. And then I'll also gain my grand strategy here. So I feel like this one could be quite easy to accomplish, but then again, it's still build specific, as you said, and as I mentioned with the sharpshooters. I would say take in most cases, but Ryan kind of pointed this out to me before we started recording, that this is probably not true for as many armies as I think, just because my opinion on it is a bit skewed because of the type of armies that I play, right?
Yeah, I see your point. The real question is, remember, it's just a grand strategy. And there's this idea in game, playing games theory, not game theory, that there's a certain amount of win more. So like, if you're already doing something, a number of these grand strategies, for example, keeping your opponents wholly outside of your own territory, if you're already going to destroy everything they have, then obviously, well, mission accomplished. But that's a win more example. I feel like if you killing off, let's say they were Skaven and they had 6 GCs, which is very easy to do in Skaven, or Gits, super easy to do. and within reason points wise, and really buffs the army. If you did manage to kill all enough of them that they have less than you, how much time would you be investing in that when you could have been putting it somewhere else? Maybe that's a distraction Carnifex only to get you those three to get those 3 points. And maybe their grand strategy, it doesn't remove theirs. So you're not getting a 6-point net gain from it either, potentially. And so the real question is this ultimately just a win more? If you were to remove all those GCs, and granted, you don't have to kill all of them, but maybe they kill one of yours. Or depending on what build you have, maybe you don't have 3. I don't know. What do you think in Lumineth the ideal number of GCs that's practical that you could have in a list would be without giving up too much of your actual hammers?
Well,
like Enlightener, Cathlar, and then a Lore Seeker, maybe.
Yeah, I think Caligrave or Lore Seeker. Caligrave, if you take this one, I think Caligrave, because your Lore Seeker is probably going to die. There is an ability now in Lumineth where the Rune of Centoi, where you get +1 to dispelling for each Sonari hero within X amount of inches, and that is quite strong if you're bringing 3 Sonari heroes, and that just lends itself amazingly well to combining with the Daysars. But I do agree that it is a bit of a win more feeling. Though I do have to say, I feel like that's true for almost all grand strategies.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess what I mean is the amount of effort you have to commit to killing some of these. Now, some of them are going to be an auto. So against Sons of Behemoth, which no one's playing right now, but let's say they were, you're going to get this pretty easily. Or Beastclaw Raiders, unless they totally kill you, right? Yeah. So, and I know that one of the reasons you're probably saying that this is so strong is because of the no shooting rule. But then what's to say they're not going to start taking, if this really did become popular, what's going to keep them from taking the sharpshooters too? I don't know. I'm not saying it's bad. I definitely think you have to build for it. I wouldn't say it's a take in most cases, and that's really just my main thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right on the money there. I kind of wish I had adapted it because I changed it in the conclusion, but I didn't change it in this slide, because I do agree that it is definitely not taken in most cases, but it's just in the games that I've played, it is so easy to get with Sonari heavy build. If you're bringing Blade Lords as well, they have the Bodyguard special rule, so not Sworn Bodyguard, but just Bodyguard special rule. So even if the enemy is bringing sharpshooters, and they have the Days Hours, for example, it's very easy to tank wounds with your Blade Lords for your Sonari heroes. And I do feel if you're fighting an opponent that is running a Skaven or Tzeentch list, for example, that is very hero-centric, I don't feel like those heroes are distraction Carnifexes, because they're bringing that amount of heroes because they want to have those heroes do things. And
I agree with you on Tzeentch. Skaven, I don't know if how familiar you are, but they end up mainly taking them to get abilities that are granted in the game. It's how they get their sub-factions, and most of what they end up bringing you is more a benefit at the start of the game than throughout the game. But I agree with you with Tzeentch. The Skaven heroes are often just taken to kind of turn your sub-factions, quote-unquote, on. To overdrive them. Like if you take 3 of something, it often overdrives a sub-faction.
Yeah, to be fair, I've only played a couple of games against Skaven, and most of them were with their previous book. But I do feel like when I got to kill their Warp Spark guys, for example, that was quite beneficial to me as a just for the army as a whole.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see your point as well. So let's move on to our conclusion then. So best strategies overall. See here, I adapted it. So take what's theirs. You mentioned that you see it a lot in the tournament scene still. Build dependent, Daysars, and Survivor's Instinct is also quite good. I do think that now with grand strategies getting harder, as well as the battle tactics, we will be seeing more strategies and tactics from the battle tomes. I still really don't like it. But because it's just so hard for them to balance those on top of all the other things that they already have to balance. I don't really understand why they would make it more difficult for themselves to make a balanced game in that regard, because no one asks for, give us more specific build options. That makes it even harder for both us and our opponent to understand each other's armies and in each other's win conditions. But
yeah. I mean, it definitely is going to make certain armies have a kind of an uphill battle against others, but they clearly did that with Gargants in general. So like, I feel like the seasons here are meant to kind of turn on and off certain things, certain builds, obviously.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what those grand strategies are also doing, is to kind of say, well, look, like this army's had a rough go for a while. Let's give them a bit of a boost. And, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I haven't had them as eligible choices in most of my tournaments, so I'll report back once I've got more experience seeing how those end up playing out.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments which strategy you prefer. I'm guessing that most of you will agree with Ryan, since he has actual data to support his opinion, and I am just running on my theory crafting here. It is an interesting point that you make, though, about enabling certain armies and disabling others. I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone lately, and there you kind of have the same thing happening over there with certain archetypes and decks, where you feel like when they bring out new cards that completely overpower certain builds, I always go, they must have seen this, right? They must have understood that this would happen. And I have the same feeling with Sons of Behemoth, for example. They knew that they would be fucking those guys over, right? There is no way in hell that they didn't know. Sure.
You know what's really funny? You don't know this, but you just opened a sort of Pandora's box. I have been addicted to Marvel Snap for the past 4 months, which is a spin-off from the makers of Hearthstone.
Yes. Ben Brode made it, right?
What's that?
Ben Brode made it, right?
Yeah. And it is super addictive. And also, I 100%. I'd already made this connection with the meta shifts with cards, but I didn't want to shift things to a new realm. But now that you've done it, this won't be the first time I reference Marvel Snap, because I fucking love that game. Yeah. And yeah. So anyway, my girlfriend hates it.
It's so addictive.
She's okay with Warhammer because I get friends through it, but I think I play Marvel Snap a little bit too much around her, and I think she's just like, what the hell, Ryan? You get one nerd game in your life. It can't be this one.
Yeah. It is just much easier to play a digital card game in between other things than an entire Warhammer game, right? But 100%. I do see a lot of similarities in how a game is designed, where I start thinking that we're always complaining about GW missing certain parts in their rule set, like how did the rule writers not notice this, or how did they not figure this out during beta testing, for example. And honestly, I'm moving away from that mindset a little bit and moving towards a mindset where they're probably not trying to make a completely balanced game, and they just want to empower certain armies for a specific time, then move on from those to different build, because that reinforces sales.
Well, I had a feeling you might go there. A lot of times they end up making like units, like models that they would like to sell, shittier in the new edition. So while I do agree that there's probably some amount of sales motive behind it, there are definitely undersold models that they never end up making better enough to make people want to go out and buy. Yeah. So
that is true. That is true.
I don't think it's uniformly that way. I think it does benefit them more than not, but if they did it otherwise, I think we'd have no examples of, like, for example, the Jabber slide just got worse. Why not?
Let me rephrase that. Say in theory it would be possible to make a perfectly balanced Warhammer game, and new units would come into your army, and that you would not need to bring any of the new stuff, because it would be balanced, and all of your choices would be equally good, but just in different builds. That will allow a lot of people to just not buy anything new anymore and just keep your army relevant for ever.
Yeah. Okay. So one, change is good. Like change keeps things spicy.
Yes.
And second, I don't think they actually have enough playtesters at GW to really be able to control 25 plus armies, like, and balance them. I just don't think they have that much foresight
Yeah, I
and
agree.
over the whole thing. And they might have a combination of competitive and non-competitive players. And what do we hear all the time is especially in Facebook groups. I'm always shocked by how non-competitive Facebook groups are. But because they'll ask the stupidest questions or make these comments about things that don't line up with my reality at all. But that's fine. Glad they have a fun time in the game. I'm just shocked that those people are out there. And what's it called is, what am I trying to say is we see it day to day in Facebook chats of how unbalanced the game is. For as soon as you balance for one side of the spectrum, the other side complains.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm just glad that third edition is as strong as it has been, and that every book has gotten better, if not way better. There have been very few exceptions to that statement. And yeah, maybe things are could be improved here or there, whatever. But I'm still optimistic. I'm still really happy with how
For
things.
sure. Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely not advocating for sacking Games Workshop sales or anything. The price hike that's coming is hurting my wallet a little bit more, though. But that's been happening since forever. Price hikes happen. No, I think the game is in its best state that it's ever been. Honestly, it's just that sometimes when I hear people complain about balance, and I'm one of them sometimes, I do encourage those people and myself as well to not think about the theory of everything being balanced, because that's, first of all, impossible, and second of all, that would be super boring.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, let's move on. Battle tactics. So this could be quite of a long one. Let's try to not make it that of a long run here. So we'll go over all the battle tactics quite quickly, and then we'll do the general talk in the conclusion slide, right?
Sure.
Okay, so gaining momentum is an old one. So pick and destroy an enemy unit and control more objectives than your opponent. Seems like a doable one. I usually complete this one during the point of my games. Turn 1 is a thing you can do if you have a lot of ranged damage, or if you have a sniper unit and you're quite sure you're going to take out a Galician champion, for example. It is quite difficult though, because in certain armies, because you still need to control more objectives than your opponent. So here you're looking at getting first turn at least if you want to do it turn 1. Anything to add?
No, I agree. It's one of the more reliable ones for sure.
Yeah.
And it's basically like eye for an eye with a condition.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. Because eye for an eye is a little bit easier even. Though, you still have to have one of your units get destroyed, but that happens anyway. So this one is super easy because you don't need to pick a unit either. So it's just, if you have had one of your units destroyed in the previous turn, now you need to destroy one of their units. Still very interesting as a battle tactic though. I love when my opponent takes this, because as Lumineth you get to stack your Aether Cords and Allied Defense on top of each other, and sometimes this battle tactic is not as easy as it would have seemed playing or fighting Lumineth armies. So I always like it when people go for this one.
Sure.
Especially with the -1 to hit from Shining Company, very, very juicy. But yeah, usually it's quite obvious when you can go for it, and then it's almost guaranteed, right?
Yeah, I think the big thing here is not if you're going to get it, but you'd have a better chance of fulfilling all your battle tactics for the game if you wait to do this one later.
That is definitely fair, yeah.
If you take it too early, desecrate their lands, which we're about to talk about, same thing.
Yeah. For sure. So desecrate their lands is usually one of the tactics that seems easiest to me. At least if you have a board that is quite balanced, as I mentioned here, easy turn 1 if the terrain is balanced. So you need to pick one terrain feature partially or wholly within your opponent's zone. So partially is a big word here, and then you need to control it in the same way that you would control an objective. Very, very easy to do. Very easy to do. But as Ryan mentioned, if you're going for this on turn 1, you're risking not having a battle tactic to complete later down the line. So sometimes it's wiser to try for a more difficult tactic turn 1 and then keep this for later, as you mentioned, I think. Still pretty good if you have an army with fast units or teleports, then you can definitely keep this for later.
Yeah, and keep in mind that controlling the two things about controlling a terrain piece is that it's 3 inches and not 6 like objectives. And then secondly, you technically check for whether you control terrain pieces at the end of every battle shock phase ever. So if you know you're going to take this, keep track of what you've already gained control of, because you can walk away from it and still have it. It doesn't say that you have to that turn gain control of the terrain piece.
Yeah.
So if you can, think 2 turns ahead, teleport a unit, go take a terrain piece that's kind of towards the side, and then go in for combat with them, so they're not going to be able to get out of it in time. They're not going to be able to pile in around you, whatever. And then you still got it, so you go kill a unit with that first unit, and then you still got the terrain piece for next turn.
Yeah, so if you were already spray canning a church nearby in their opponents in their zone, you'll still get it if you're still spray canning them the next turn, right?
Right. This one, this is good, and this one can be a kind of gotcha for some people. So you know.
Okay, and then this one's mine. Pick and destroy a unit with an attack made by your chosen general. Very army dependent. I've seen people take big hero monsters or even named characters simply because this is a battle tactic. They'll lose out on a command trade, but they feel like the other battle tactics are so unreliable that you kind of want to have this one as an option. Because most non-named heroes that are still able to be generals aren't that good in combat anyway, so it's very army dependent, right?
Yeah, and keep in mind it says attack, and so for anyone that's not a rules lawyer out there, magic doesn't count as an attack.
Yeah.
So if your guy has a shooting profile, this is what you're looking for, like a Stormcast Knight Judicator who can actually do quite a bit of wounds with his shooting attack, and then maybe if he's already within combat, well, you get 2 shots at the ability.
Yeah.
What I often find with this, though, is that you need to walk that delicate line of softening up a target ahead of time without killing it. And then your guy goes and finishes them off. It can be tricky, which makes this one of the riskier ones, as you were referencing. But if you know you can do it, then you're good to go.
Yeah. For Lumineth, for example, I've seen some people make Teclis their general, even though we're missing out on very good command traits in that case, simply because it's quite reliable, or more reliable, I should say, to take out something with Teclis than it is with, let's say, a Cathalar, for example.
Oh, sure, than a Cathalar, but that shooting attack whiffs almost everything.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're shooting with Teclis, you're rolling a 1, either on the to wound or the to hit roll, for sure.
Right. Now, and when I was playing Tzeentch, I had a Magister on Disc as my general.
Oh, yeah.
And he has a shooting attack and can fight, but not good. But because you have fate dice, you can mitigate that a little bit. I still have failed this tactic at least once or twice with that guy, though. So.
Yeah, it is a fun one to be used against you as well, because you can really mind game an opponent here. If there's a need to soften up a target beforehand, as you've mentioned, you can just opt not to use all out defense on that target, for example. So just because you want them to kill it in one go, for example.
Yeah. With the softening up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so then the new ones. A Matter of Honor, pick and destroy an enemy Galician champion or sworn bodyguard unit with an attack made by a friendly Galician champion or sworn bodyguard units. Very difficult to pull off, I think. Works well with snipers once again, but other than that, I've not really seen it been pulled off quite as much as I thought it would, simply because there's just not a lot of sworn bodyguards around.
Well, yeah, but if there are a lot of GCs, so obviously the good thing, unlike grand strategies with battle tactics, you don't have to commit to one ahead of the game before you know who you're playing. Yeah. If this doesn't apply to you, then it doesn't apply to you. Okay. I actually just got this one off against a Beast of Chaos player because he had I had 3 GCs that could shoot, and you don't have to choose which of your GCs is shooting. And I
All
just shot,
right, yes.
I didn't have to, or what am I trying to say here? I could have done it in combat. I could have done it in shooting,
Yeah.
and he had a weak target that was pretty easy to bring down, like a weak GC that had no battle line around it. Also, unlike this one's mine, maybe your softening up guys end up just deleting the battle line unit that's protecting them from being shot or attacked with melee, and then you just go in for the kill with one of your GCs. It didn't matter which one it was. You just have to pick the target enemy Gleason champion. So yes, I agree with you. Swarm Bodyguard's probably not going to be that prevalent in the game, but GCs will. And the real question is, can you get rid of their protection battle line unit if you need to kill them in shooting? Or do you have enough GCs that can get there fast enough? So depends on your build.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay, lead the assault, control 2 or more objectives in enemy territory and contest each with a friendly Galician champion. Whew. This is just impossible in certain missions altogether.
Yep.
Very difficult. Very difficult.
I barely even consider this to be an option. It's almost like one of those book battle tactics that you're never going to get because you didn't even bring the right build for it.
Yeah. There's so many things that need to go right. If it was contest 2 objectives, I would say go for it.
Even then, you still have to kind of build for it. Yeah, and I love that they say at least 2 of the objectives that you control are in enemy territory. It's just at least 2. Come on.
Bit crazy.
Good luck having more than 2. But anyway, yeah.
Would you take it if it was 1?
Sure. You could do it with a teleporter.
Yeah.
And remember, a lot of people are taking a foreshadowing, if we are talking about it, but the aspect of the champion that lets a unit count as 10 models on an objective.
Stubborn as a Rhinox?
Yeah, that one's actually pretty good for that, especially you got a teleporter.
That is true. Yeah, I think I would have loved it to be just control 1 or more objectives because that also forces you to make risky decisions, and risky decisions are the things that make games interesting, right? Because you have to put your champion on a place in a place where you don't want them to be.
Yeah.
Okay, United Offense, pick and control 1 objective your opponent controlled and contest it with 2 or more Galician champions. Well, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about the slides, this is one that we needed to kind of edit here because the opponent had to have previously been controlling it, and then you have to go grab it with 2 GCs. It's definitely doable if, like you said, for certain builds. I don't know if I've ever gotten it off, but in the way I've been playing, but I've been mostly playing KO where I'm flying around and weird stuff. So you don't have a big body count in KO to be able to help contest an objective with your non-GCs. So, but I bet people are getting this thing off. It's not going to be the easiest, but I think it's okay.
Yeah. I've managed to get this one off in both of my games.
Okay, so you just stole it from them and then had 2 GCs.
Yes.
Okay. But you're playing castle builds. Castle builds are going to definitely have the GC.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's just so easy to do for me because that's what I was doing anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, and then cunning maneuver. Pick 1 Galician champion that is more than 3 inches from enemy units, so it can't be in combat. Contest and control an objective wholly outside your territory with it, and remain outside of 3 inches of enemy units.
Yeah.
This
is basically the new version of Eye for an Eye or Desecrate Their Lands. It's the easiest one for a lot of armies to do, especially considering, like you said, Tunnel Master. And then a lot of armies are going to be intentionally choosing teleporty or fast GCs anyway. And then the other thing about this too is that GCs generally don't want to be in combat. So that's the only other restriction here, is that you can't be in combat. And if you've teleported, you're probably not going to land the charge. So that is the trick, though. If they blocked you out so that you can't get on the objective without a charge, then you're in combat, so you have to kill them.
Yep.
So that could be a problem.
But then you just don't pick this battle
It's
tactic.
100%, but it turns it off. It's no longer a choice. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that there's a lot of games where you're not trying to complete this one at some point, right?
If you've got the guy that can do it, I can imagine certain builds. Hell, even Fire Slayers have the tunneling Rune Smiter, so technically he can get over there, and everyone can take a tunnel map. So, yeah.
Okay. So in conclusion, completing battle tactics is now a bit more challenging, I think. I remember when we were talking, or when I was talking about the first season here, when it was still a comparison for the Lumineth, just as a comparison for Lumineth. I thought those tactics were a bit harder to do, but now I do see your point where it's way more challenging, and I think it requires a lot of tournament organizers to finally consider the battle tone tactics, even though I don't like them personally.
Or like they were saying on Warhammer Weekly, that maybe it's better to make it so that you can't just generally get 5. That we're really going to see more games where there's someone gets 4 and someone gets 3, which didn't previously happen at the beginning of 3rd edition.
Yes, that would be also pretty cool. Because then you're finally winning on battle tactics and not just on mission objectives.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does kind of focus your army builds into 3 types of units. So you're either going to need fast units for capturing terrain, moving on into enemy territory and so on. You're going to need elite units as before, just to take out Galician champions, it should say here, so GCs and other targets. Or you need fast Galician champions, preferably with teleports, to complete easy battle tactics. I've been kind of toying with an idea of a list building video, but as you mentioned, where we kind of put our thoughts in on how we build lists, but also on what kind of blocks you need in every list, right? What general building blocks, what kind of type of units do you need in every list? And I feel like this list is the base of that. When I build an army, I would only add a tanking unit or screens on top of these 3 types of units, I think, to build a good list right now. I want at least 2 fast units. I want at least 2 or 3 hammer or delete units. I want at least 1 fast Galician champion, or 1 with a teleport at least, and then 2 screens or something.
Yeah, I mean, but that's been true for a while.
Yeah.
They've been saying, not to crap on what you just said, but
yeah,
I feel
my
like
ideas are useless, Ryan. Let's just finish off here.
No, what I mean though is like one of the big things they've been saying for a long time is the game is won and lost in the movement phase, and so they've just made a bunch of battle tactics that really require movement, especially with guys that maybe typically aren't known for being fast. But to combat this, or to kind of like balance things out, a lot of the missions, as we'll talk about shortly, are very centrically located on the battlefield, which means at the end of the day, that movement's like fast armies are going to have to still come in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think it might balance out better than we think it will. But I definitely think we will be scoring less battle tactics for sure.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, doing a list building video would be fun.
Let's get to it at some point. We've been talking about it for 6 months now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. Enhancements. This is a quick chapter. So there's 3 new artifacts of power. They can only be taken by Galician champions. The first one is a Tusk Helm. You inflict a mortal wound on a 4+, and you roll dice equal to your charge roll. So it's basically a charge from a Thunder Tusk, for example.
Which doesn't stack if you already have that ability.
Yeah, probably why it's called a Tusk Helm as well. You also have the Night Flyer Cloak. It allows you to set up your champion in reserves, and at the end of the movement phase, you can deploy it within what you need to deploy it within 1 inch of a battle line unit and more than 9 inches from enemy units as usual. And then the Griffeather Charm is a 5+ ward. It's back, but now it's balanced because it's only for Galician champions. I think this is a cool thing.
Yeah, I missed that part. That these are only for Galician champions. I forgot that. I don't see a lot of people using, but
No.
But yeah.
It's just the good old conundrum, Ryan. Is it better than Arcane Tome?
Right. Well, again, for worlds or teams type things, you can only take one of each. So, I've actually become kind of a fan of only using your book stuff anyway, and then maybe these guys.
Hmm.
But the universal ones, I try not to use anymore, just
Oh,
because I
cool.
feel like you're practicing with something that you're not going to be able to use. I've got two big tournaments coming up soon, so I can't. It doesn't really make sense for me to practice that way.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah, Arcane Tome and maybe Master still very good arguments in a
Yeah,
lot of them.
for sure. But then you have this new enhancement. So it's called Aspect of the Champion. You get one for free, as you do with all enhancements. And if you take a battalion where you get to choose one extra enhancement, you could also choose to take two aspects of the champion, for example. There is three that are quite good. There's one that is definitely less good than the other ones. And then out of those three, I usually see one or two. So Tunnel
Oh,
Master, I personally quite like. So once instead of a normal move, you get to teleport your Galician champion you took this enhancement on. Usual rules apply, so you can't teleport within 9 inches of an enemy unit, and so on and so on. I like this a lot, especially with the new battle tactics and the missions that we'll go over shortly. This is definitely my top two. Do you agree?
yeah, it's an auto take for most armies if you don't have access to a guy who can do this. I'm actually more curious which one you're going to say is not the good one.
Well,
Um,
this one, Fueled by Gurish Rage, is in my eyes the worst of the four. It's not bad. It's just not as good as the other three, I feel.
yeah, you didn't like the Phoenix Stone either. I
No.
remember when we were talking about it, but I actually still like the Phoenix Stone. And the interesting thing is this would be a double Phoenix Stone situation. You could even put it on the guy that has the Phoenix Stone so that just in case he gets sniped, you don't lose the Phoenix Stone.
That would be
Um,
so funny. That would be
yeah.
really funny. Yeah.
But keep in mind how important your GCs are. Like if they slayed your GC at the in the last turn, and then let's say you would put the Griff Feather Charm on him, or you had Protection Attack or something else, a 5+ ward, and you had this thing, and then they picked something about a GC needing to be on objective or blah blah blah. There's so many things that interact with it. I think this could be a game changer for certain situations. It's like you said, it's not bad. I can see why you think it's the worst one of the four, but if you're taking multiple of these enhancements, I don't think it's the worst one, especially if you only have one GC for
Yeah.
some reason.
No, I was actually just going to say that if you're taking multiple, this one becomes quite highly rated, in my opinion, for the second pick. It's just if you have to choose one, I would probably not be okay with dropping either Tunnel Master or Stubborn as a Rhinox. You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Just because both of them help you win games more consistently than Fueled by Gurish Rage does.
Yeah.
That's the only point I'm making, because you kind of convinced me on the Phoenix Stone, though I'm still hesitant about it because you've got that 3+, right? And if you're counting on your hero surviving with Fueled by Gurish Rage and you don't get that 3+, I think I'd rather score a good battle tactic with Tunnel Master, for example, or with Stubborn as a Rhinox, and not by chancing on Fueled by Gurish Rage.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Stubborn as a Rhinox or not of a Rhinox, as a Rhinox, your champion can stand on an objective if no other enemy GCs are contesting that objective, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, it's great. I've been forgetting that the GCs turn it off, which applies to a comment I'd made later for one of this battle plans. But yeah, it's great unless you don't have any problem holding objectives as.
Yeah.
So
True.
if you're an army with a crazy amount of bodies, then who cares?
Mm-hmm.
You probably have better choices.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a command trait that the Soulblight have, where you count on an objective as your wound characteristic, and
Oh.
that was taking on zombie dragons quite often. There's just so many good command traits in the book that it's not always an auto pick, but it was still considered quite good, and I think it still is. So having that on a Galician champion is quite cool in my eyes.
Yeah.
And usually,
Definitely getting you up to 10.
Yeah, and just if I think back to most of my games where we were both planning on playing a competitive kind of game, how often are my front lines, uh, in combat, and then they teleport into my back lines, and my home objective is in jeopardy, and then just having that 10 objective GC on there kind of allows you to chill out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because three revenants, for example, can't just take it away from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But of course, like if you are playing in this meta where it's got a GC, all they got to do is put that guy on the objective, and then all of a sudden it turns off.
True.
So
True.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so leadership of the alpha is also once per game. So this Galician champion can issue rally, all-out attack or defense, or redeploy up to 3 times in the same phase without spending command points for the second or third command. Pretty cool.
I like this one a lot.
Yes.
I was using it as my default one in KO because getting to do an all-out attack on 3 ships in a turn is not bad at all.
Sure.
Or the redeploy or the all-out defense. All of it's real solid.
Yeah.
You wish that they'd had 3 Unleash Hells.
No, I don't, Ryan. No, I don't.
For my builds, I would have loved that. It would have been an auto choice for me, but oh well.
Yeah. I hate Unleash Hell. Even as someone who has Sentinels in their army, I hate Unleash Hell. Ugh.
Yeah, well.
I love redeploying 3 times though. That can just win you the game. If you roll big 3 times and you're denying an alpha strike on 3 fronts, good lord.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times for me, it's like you've got one big hammer unit that's coming into a block of multiple targets, and like you need to deny them an eye for an eye or whatever they've chosen.
That is also fair, yeah.
It wouldn't be necessarily on 3 fronts in that situation. It would just be in that one front. You want to get everyone out of range, and that can make a difference too. So.
It's just cool that everyone can kind of feel like an Iron Jaws player for once in their game.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. Missions. So we put a lot of effort into these slides because we designed all the battle plans, and then I kind of did a synopsis of what you have to keep in mind when playing this mission. And thanks to you, Ryan, we also have this information below every battle plan where you can see how many objectives you can control before the first turn, so during deployment, and how much of your board space you can actually control or take up during your deployment as well. So those are 2 very nice additions.
I've been doing those statistics for those numbers myself. The objectives you control before the first turn is notable because a lot of times it looks like you can control something, but you have to stand 9 inches outside of an opponent's territory. Now, keep in mind, if you have a pre-game move, then all this goes out the window. That's pretty awesome. But as you referenced earlier, this largely impacts the holding more objectives scoring point that we get. So hold 1, hold 2, hold more, which is the standard, not in every mission, but this largely impacts that. So, we don't have anything like, what's it called, Silk Steel Nests anymore, where there's 8 objectives on the table and they're super spread out. We don't see that too much anymore, where you can control 4 from the get-go. And then as far as the deployment zone, the interesting thing about this is that we've talked a lot about what's wholly within enemy territory, or a number of armies have special abilities that turn on if they're wholly inside enemy territory. And this helps you kind of gauge what's the average we're seeing. The mode here is 25%. That's what we see the most, I think. Yeah. But it is possible that you have smaller. And maybe not in this battle. This set, what was it? Realmstone Cache is right. Is actually the only one that's smaller.
I was just going to say most of them or a lot of them are actually 31.2.5 or something, or 7.5. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be 5 out of the 16 the slots there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for each person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, there's some interesting stats to kind of keep in mind, and I haven't seen anyone in other channels reference too often, so I thought it would be kind of a good thing to start introducing to the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So Price of Glaze, the first mission, I really love this mission. It's just such a classic, right? The idea of it is just so good. So you have 5 objectives, but they are activated one at a time by the player who goes second that round. The thing is, you can, I think if I'm not mistaken, you can still control them for battle tactics. So you can control 2 objectives in turn 1, for example, but you can't control more for your scoring from the mission, right?
Yeah, that's correct. They do exist on the field as objectives. They're just not on for victory points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this slow growth kind of mission. It definitely rewards you more if you have a castle built and if you're going for a 1-drop, for example. I think I would definitely choose to go second here, because having that objective or the first objective in your own territory is quite big.
Yeah, the one thing about castle builds is if you have a castle build and they don't, and they get the choice, they're gonna pick the ones furthest from you and make you spread out.
Yes.
So I mean that's a thing. And then remember, the first turn you choose what's in the middle, but after that you can start choosing either the 2 enemy controlled, like the ones that are halfway in territory. So if they were doing that, then their second choice is almost always going to be their own to turn it on, right? So the good thing is Proving Ground's gone. Proving Ground used to really double screw people over here, because you were getting to choose both that and the activated objective every turn, or battle round. So at least that's gone. Yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, I feel with how missions are designed these days, I just think it's. I'm not sure how you feel about it, because you're a freaking tournament player. But I feel if you're organizing a game day or a tournament day, whatever. I think you'd be remiss to not include your missions into your rules pack.
Because they always do. I mean, I don't know if I've ever been to one where they didn't have missions listed.
Well, in Discord, I think 2 weeks ago, we were talking about this, and someone mentioned that they were going to a tournament, and I was trying to give advice, and then I was like, "So what missions are you playing?" And they said they're going to roll them at the day itself.
I mean, it's fair for list building if you want to put everyone on an even keel, and then it becomes more random. But obviously, there were, especially in the last GHB, the season 1, we had a couple battle plans that turned off teleporting or deep striking entirely.
Yeah, that's gone though. Luckily.
Yeah, that is gone. But when that was in effect, that's extra brutal if you brought that kind of arm.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. So Price of Glaze, thumbs up. Ransom Cash, also a classic by now. Just because it's so visually appealing, I think, to me at least. So there's only the middle objective. It should say objective, not objectives. So the middle objective explodes into 2 objectives at the start of the round, and it always explodes in opposite directions, right? So they're numbered in the GHB. I just didn't put the numbers in here because it was just getting too crowded for my tastes.
Sure.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, and the exploding. It's important to mark that it's not still that objective anymore. They're 2 brand new objectives that have to be regained control of. So it's not like whoever had the middle one now controls those 2. So you basically start over. Yeah.
You wrote down in your notes advantage to first mover. I'm quite sure what you mean, but care to explain?
Well. So we're keeping in mind that you can't control an objective on turn 1, first turn, because it's the middle one that's you have to be outside of. So the first mover is going to have hold 1 and hold more by default. And if you're a castle build or tanky enough to resist them coming on, or you can get enough of your models onto that objective, they might not even be able to get hold 1 in the next turn.
Yeah.
So those first 2 battle rounds, you're looking pretty good if you can tank it out and endure the storm. I love this objective. This mission, I mean. I've always enjoyed playing it. And the other thing to keep in mind is when it does split, I like the randomization of the splitting. When it does split, if it does the one that goes wide, they're not in normal places that those 2 objectives land. If you think about how we divide into 16 lines or 16 squares, they're actually 7.5 inches off the side, which really rewards faster armies. And It creates two that are wholly outside either territory, which does impact some of the battle tactics. And
That's true.
whereas otherwise, there's one that's partially, both are partially in one or the other territory, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So this definitely rewards armies that can both castle and make some moves when they have to.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. You had the in the first mission pack, not season one, but the one before that, you had the comet thing, right, where there was an objective and it struck somewhere randomly or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't like that as much because you had to you could really suffer from bad luck if you were badly poised there. But here, because it explodes in opposite directions, you're never going to get hammered by one roll or the other because it's always going to be sort of okay for you usually. I really like how they balance that randomization here.
Yeah. And it's also the smallest deployment zone that we have out of all 8.
Yes, very small, only 30 inches wide and 15 deep.
Yeah, and which means that if you've got a terrain piece in the middle, and it's a big one, you might get locked out from your own, or you're going to be really squeezed in. Sometimes even some terrain pieces say that they can't be placed unless they're outside of 3 from other terrain and stuff.
Yep.
So it could be difficult.
Someone brought Teclis, and with the temple and a lot of Venari units, they just couldn't fit everything in.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Which is another reason why you would want to know that you have this one in a battle pack before you go to a tournament. If you know you're taking a horde army and you can't reserve anything, you're going to have to actually see if you can fit stuff in. And then, a lot of times tournaments they will give you the battle plans, but they won't give you the terrain layout. So you're not going to know necessarily how much of that is eaten up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they slap a church in the middle of your deployment zone, you're kind of fucked.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. 2 out of 2 so far. So battle lines drawn is also an oldie. It is a bit. It is redesigned though, right? Oh, this was the one that didn't allow teleports.
Okay.
Yeah. So you control battlefield quarters like you do objectives. So there are no objectives, but battlefield quarters count as objectives. Rewards horde armies in my eyes a little bit more than it does other armies. It is very easy to score big on turn 1 if you are the first mover because it's just so easy to take 1, 2, and then you get to score more, as you mentioned before. Yay for teleports and reserves.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't actually had to play this one that much. Maybe it's because of that old rule, and then I just haven't played it in the new one. But so this one hasn't come up a whole lot. I'm glad that it's wholly within. That is good.
Yeah.
Which means you can't your unit can't be partially across one or the other like you can with 2 normal objectives.
Yes, because before you could literally drop a unit in the middle of the field and they would be touching all quarters.
You'd still have to choose which one they're counting as for that, but they would be safe and they could block people out from getting over.
You've not seen this one in the current battle packs?
I mean, at the world type terms, the teams, they usually have every single mission and they can come up at different points. Some of them are more frequently possible to come up than others, but because you're playing 5 or 6 rounds with 8 players at these big team tournaments, and so they just have a lot of missions going on.
Yeah.
So I will have to practice it for that, but no, I haven't had a whole lot of experience with this one.
Okay. The lurkers below control the closest objective before you can control the next one, and so on. So if you're the red player, for example, you need to control the one in your zone, then the middle one, and only then can you try to control the blue one. You still have the instant win condition here if you control all objectives. I'm not a huge fan of instant win conditions in any game, so that is a little bit weird. But there is a caveat now where you need to kind of grow towards your opponent's zone, right? Or advance towards your opponent's zone. No objectives can be controlled before turn 1. So this was something that you pointed out in your notes. You can't control something during deployment.
Right, which does, unlike what we said before about prize, what was it? why am I
Pas-de-Calais?
forgetting? Galets, yeah, or
Mhm.
Galais, that you where the objectives are there and controllable, they just aren't turned on for victory points. This turns off a lot of your battle tactics because you can't. It literally says you can't even control them.
Mhm.
So, which is something. That's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Means you might not be getting that first turn battle tactic, and it's definitely going to help out armies that have good battle tactics in their books. Um, Something else worth pointing out here is that the smooth brain idea. Okay, so you can't control objectives turn one, so that means most people are going to say, well, that means you could get the auto win four. But the reality is, you can gain control of objectives in the opponent's turn too.
Okay.
So for example, let's say no one can control anything battle round one,
Mhm.
but and we said before turn one, but this what is hold on, yeah, they can't be controlled in turn one at all in battle round game. So that's a little typo on the slide there,
Oh, okay.
but regardless, so what this means is you're going to control something on turn two. Okay, sure. Then if you have a unit that's already there and you're close enough to the enemy side, you can redeploy in their turn and grab the middle one in their turn. And so that means in battle round two, you can get two objectives. It doesn't say you can only gain control of one per battle round. It says per turn, which means if you redeploy and they really kind of meagerly put some models on there, you could get control of one and two, and then all you have to do is take the top of turn three, and then you can go grab it then.
Yeah.
You could even get at the bottom of three. It's not very likely because they probably have really defended their objective, but it is technically possible. The auto win, I think, this is one of these win more kind of situations where you're probably going to end up not seeing the auto win unless someone's just totally annihilating the other player, or the other player is just playing super poorly with objective control.
Yeah.
And the other thing is in tournaments, a lot of times we're playing with a differential system, and they have to rule this one separately because there are no points scored. So usually you're saying like, well, I scored 5 VPs more than you did.
Mhm.
What is that? So that 5 point difference equates to some amount of sharing 20 points between the two of you.
Yeah.
This one has to be controlled for that because there are no victory points to contest, and you don't control anything for getting your grand strategy in this one either, unless you both tie, right?
Yeah.
So that's something else to take into account. It's a weird one for tournaments, and it's not very popular in my experience, but it is in the teams tournaments, so it's there.
Okay. Cool.
It's a weird one.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one for sure. In the presence of idols, so you pick 3 units to be idols. They need to be on the field, just to be clear, so they can't be in reserves, because you only select your idols after deployment. Units within 6 inches of those idols only lose 50% of their models to battle shock, and you also get a VP every time one of your idol units kills one of theirs, basically.
Yeah.
There is no objects you can control during before turn 1, which might seem odd since there's one clipping both zones, but you can you need to deploy 9 inches away from your opponent's zone. So there's no way that you can get within 6 inches during your deployments, unless you have a rule that allows you to, obviously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This one can be pretty swingy with points because if you can get those idle units to kill the other idle units, that's an extra 3 points in the game. So that's basically an extra grand strategy.
Yeah, and there's no way that every time that you lose an idle unit, your opponent doesn't only gain 1 VP, but you also lose out on the chance of getting a VP with that unit yourself.
Well, yeah, yes, but even if you're taken down to 1 idle unit, that 1 idle unit could still kill all 3 of their idle units. So it does mean that you're losing less fronts to be able to do it more, but it's still possible. Mm-hmm. But again, it's a win more kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other thing about this one too is, and I mentioned this in the notes, I'm pretty sure that if you null deploy, like Beast of Chaos can totally null deploy, Ideneth can do it, a couple of Nurgle can, a few other armies where you don't set up anything on the battlefield. It does say in the rules you must pick idle units. You can't just choose 2 or whatever. And so if you do have 3 units on the table, or however many you have, up to 3, they have to be your idle units unless you have more to choose from. I'm assuming with null deploy, that means that you've simultaneously taken out your ability to gain extra VPs because you don't have any idols, but they also have lost their ability to gain extra VPs because you don't have any idols. You can't choose units that are in reserve. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting strategy. If you know you're playing this one and you're not, all of your units are pretty squishy, and you like doing a null deploy, it's a thing you could do. Or if you just want to make it so that you only have like 1 or 2 units that are on the board, like Castle Eye is pretty good at doing that in Soulblight, where they have to put like their big guys, like the dragons and stuff, but then they put all their knights and wolves and stuff in deployment or in reserve. And then at that point, if you can keep your guys from dying, those 3 big guys that are relatively tanky, then maybe you're swinging the thing in your favor. Make them come to you and then take them out. There's definitely some strategy involved with those idols. That said, as far as the battle shock, everyone forgets that rule, and it rarely comes into play. So, maybe some armies are really good at remembering this, but I've almost never seen anyone actually remember that battle shock 50% thing.
Yeah, for some reason I really can't tell you why, but I've never really enjoyed this mission ever. Every time I've played it, I'm like, okay. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it's super popular at the tournament, so I feel like it's one of the more common ones. That, Realmstone Cache, and Prize of Gallet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it time for a new one? Nope. The Knight is Paths allows for diagonal teleports from corner to the opposite corner, but you need to be wholly within 6 inches before you can teleport. You kind of need your static backlines to block corners, because otherwise you're really opening up yourself to getting squished between 2 armies, or 2 pieces of an army at least. It is very challenging if you're into the classic play style where you're advancing your troops and your heroes are in the back. You definitely need to defend yourself from all fronts here.
Yeah, I've never actually seen anyone use it. So
really,
it's the first few times I played it, I tried to block people out by keeping a unit back there. And remember, you don't have to do the teleport instead of a move. You get to do it at the end of the movement phase after you move. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But the armies that can already teleport, of which a lot of people taking some of that now, aren't going to be needing it. And plus, it doesn't put you in range of the objective to immediately teleport and then control the objective without doing a charge. Mainly I haven't seen it. Like, it's just kind of a layout. I don't like these stair step layouts because they're just annoying to set up.
Very.
But and then you've got 3 different radii of 9-inch radiuses that you have to do from those 3 different points.
Yeah,
that you
it's
have
the worst.
It's annoying. I don't love this mission just for the setup part, and then the teleport never really comes into play. And just a quick note on the bottom there, we forgot the one objective you can control before the first.
It's the middle one in your zone. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Only the worthy Galician champions. So this is a new one. Trump other units when contesting objectives. So this rewards teleporting or fast Galician champions. You're unable to control objectives with more than 1 GC, though. That's something that you wanted to be specifically mentioned here. Just to be clear, it just means that you can't stack your GCs on top of each other, right? If one, you can still have 2 on an objective, but you can only ever count as one trumping the other one.
Which means something, because most of the time GCs are only going to count as 2 models. On an objective, which means if they've got a GC and you've got a GC, then whoever had it from the previous turn keeps having it unless that GC dies. And then you'd think the smooth brain answer would be, okay, well, you can, if you have 2 GCs on there, then that's 4 models worth versus the one person that's got 2. But like they said, you only get to contest. It's basically like a fight between those 2 GCs. They're both kind of competing in like the battle dome or whatever. So the one exception here, I thought it was 2, but the what is it called? Stubborn is a Rhino. It gets shut off because the other person's got a GC. The only exception here would be a GC that happens to count as more models on an objective, like an ogre one, um, like an ogre GC on the ground. He's counting as 5 models on an objective, so he would automatically gain control of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also interesting to note that Desecrator lands is super easy in this one, like super easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I like that mission. Path of the Champion, you can pick 2 battle tactics if your Gleason champion is contesting an objective wholly outside your territory. I love the concept of this. I put down high risk, high reward, but you kind of mentioned, or is it actually an insurance policy? Is a question that you asked.
Yeah. The idea being that so you can't do that on turn 1 because you can never control an objective outside of your territory at the start of your hero phase with a GC because you can't have teleported by that point.
Lore Seekers can, but yeah.
Sure. Okay. Most armies wouldn't be able to do that, and plus you would have to. You only get to use 2. Sorry, that I'm thinking the heroic action thing. This you would be able to do even if you took the first half of the battle round, but so that means what I'm saying is turn 1 you're only going to get to do 1 for most armies, 1 battle tactic, and then turns 2 through 5 you could do 2, but there are only 8 battle tactics in the book to begin with. So unless you're using book battle tactics, as in battle tome battle tactics, then you're not going to have access to them anyway. Plus, keep in mind how hard some of those battle tactics are, and then on top of that, what I mean by the insurance policy is that instead of maybe thinking, oh, I'm going to get 4 points this turn for battle tactics, instead maybe what it's more like is you choose one that's really hard, but you might be able to get it, and then have a backup one just in case to guarantee that you do end up getting some amount of battle tactics for that turn. This is particularly good if you can use your book battle tactics, because then you can see it as kind of like a throwaway that, okay, there's a good chance I could get it, but maybe I'm not reliant on it. And at least I'm leading, because my opponent won't be able to probably do this. If I've got a GC contesting an objective wholly outside the territory, they'll have to also have it. And remember, it's at the start of your turn. And you have to choose those 2 battle tactics. So you would have had to have gotten... They can't move a GC onto that territory, onto that objective in that turn and still be able to do this thing.
Yeah.
I
love it though. I love the concept of it, especially in friendly games, and even if you're even in competitive games, if you're a good sport, it is so hype when someone's trying to get 2 objectives in the same turn. It is very cool.
I haven't seen it happen very much, but I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
Yeah. Okay. Jaws of Galay or Galat. Starting from the second round, the second player can remove 1 objective each round. Whew. I'm going to let you take this one because you've had some experience with this one, right?
Yeah. So the good news is, because it's starting from the second round, all the max that you can remove is 4 out of the 5 objectives. But this is pretty brutal. If you consistently get to be the person making that choice, you can make it so that a certain number of battle tactics aren't even winnable or achievable by your opponent, because they have to be like inside, fully outside your territory or something like that. So just immediately delete the ones that are outside their territory. Then if you're alpha E enough and you can go grab their objectives, then good for you. And remember, you remove it after you've already scored your points. So it's kind of like whatever mission it was from last GHB that we don't have anymore, where you could burn objectives. Maybe that's 6 Steel Nest. But instead, you're not getting an extra point when you burn it. So there's no extra point here. You're simply removing a battle objective off the table, which can be really punishing with only 5 on the table and only a certain number that count as fully within enemy territory or whatever. Actually, nothing's fully within, but partially within. So, it's an interesting one. And like you said, or we put on here, it does definitely give an advantage to armies with good battle tome tactics, because if they remove enough of those objectives, you're falling back on what you've got in your book. So, yeah.
On the one hand, I kind of hate it, and on the other hand, I love the tactical aspect of it, because obviously your first instinct is going to be to delete an objective that your opponent's controlling because you don't want them to control it. But then you can also think, what kind of army am I fighting? For example, if you're fighting an army without any ranged units, and you have a lot of ranged units, and you're starting to delete the objectives closest to you, your opponent will be forced to leave units in their own zone to keep that objective, or move more units to that zone, thus allowing you to shoot more easily into them, and them having not a counter nearby to take advantage of that. So I love the whole planning phase you can do here, but it's just, yikes, getting the one drop here is so important.
Yeah, and being able to choose, and you know, the some of these really do lean more into testing your skill level with like thinking ahead and strategizing, as you're saying. So this is definitely one of them. The big one. But you might also argue for twists and turns. I think twists and turns, even though I think you had a kind of other about it, but we'll get there in a second.
Yes, I think it's the next one. No, ours for the taking. Score 2 if you control enemy's objective, and extra if your Galician champion controls the middle objective. So you basically just score extra for your opponent's objective, and you get also extra points if your champions are controlling the middle one. I think here it's quite important to defend your own objective at all costs, but because denying your opponent those extra points is just as valuable as getting them yourself, in my eyes at least.
Yeah, keep in mind this doesn't have hold 1, hold 2, hold more, and then those extra points. It's just those points. So you can get 1 for your own, max 2 for the middle, max 2 for the and then definitely 2 for this. So you're getting 5 for objectives at most. But also keep in mind that this replaced the old objective, the old mission, where it was 1, 2, and 4 for those guys.
Right.
So it means it's still less swinging than what you used to be able to get, which obviously max was 7 points plus then your battle tactic.
Yeah.
So it's gotten a little more conservative, being down to 5 points and then battle tactic. I do agree. Obviously, you should try to protect your own, but giving up 1 extra point, especially if you're making up for it by having a GC in the middle, and let's say they don't have a GC that they can put on the middle, then it ends up balancing out. It's not as swingy as it might seem, like that someone's looking at some crazy lead or something.
Yeah, the swinginess on the first one could be really brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Twists and turns, here we are. So I was looking forward to this discussion because I absolutely hate it and you love it, right?
And it's not because I want randomness. I actually think let's go on how it works, and then we'll talk.
Okay, so you've got 5 objectives and they turn on and off. It's quite complicated to explain, but when you control an objective after the rounds, if I'm not mistaken, or after the turn, you need to roll, and if you roll 1, 2, 3, it's turned off, and if you roll 4, 5, 6, it remains on, and you get +1 on the roll if you have a Galician champion on that objective that you control, and it's kind of this. Well, you could call it twists and turns, but you could always also call it ebb and flow, because it takes away and it gives a little bit. So you really need to have an army that's very maneuverable here. I don't feel like that's good for a competitive setting, but you strongly disagree, right?
There's some strategy to this. So I'm going to try to explain the turning on, because it turns off at the end of your turn and turns on at the beginning of the next turn.
Yeah.
So forget about the +1, -1 for right now. Just think of it as 50-50. At the end of the player whose turn is ending, they roll for every one of their active objectives. So if they don't control anything, it's not going to have any effect. That means turn 1, like at the very beginning of the game, the ones that start as inactive aren't going to magically turn on. Or no, everything starts active. That's what I mean. So nothing at the end of the first turn can be
turn on.
Like everything's already on anyway.
Yeah.
So at the end of that first turn, let's say they can only, like, realistically, all 5, right? They're probably realistically going to get 2, maybe 3 of the objectives from. And remember, you're not holding those corners either from the beginning. So you're not holding any of them actually from the beginning. So you're going to go try to grab some things. They might turn off at the end of turn one, and then when the next player takes their turn, they don't have control of any objectives at that moment. So nothing else is getting turned on because everything's already on anyway. And the ones that just got turned off can't get turned on. So this push and pull of having a GC on one of these things to make it a little more likely that it stays active, sometimes you don't want it to stay active. So granted, you had control of it previously, and this is a hold one, hold two. But if you knew for a fact they were going to be able to come over there and steal it from you, you kind of want it to turn off, which means in a certain sense, you don't want to make it more likely it stays on.
Yeah.
And you want to get that GC off of the thing. So I think it does reward people who have good foresight into the likelihood that these things are going to happen based off of what your opponent has access to at any given moment. Mm-hmm. If they're nowhere near an objective, you do, of course, want it to stay on as long as possible. And remember also that for battle tactics, them being on or off has nothing to do with it. It's only for victory points from how many objectives you control. So you still have 5 objectives that are on the table that can be gained from battle tactics. It doesn't specify that they have to be active to be controlled. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy how it works. But I actually really enjoyed playing it, and it was a close game too because of it. And I think that does make for a better competitive scene, and it does reward some amount of risk reward. Whether I should leave a GC on this thing or not. Maybe sometimes you do want it to turn off. Maybe you don't. And you don't know what's going to happen. Also on the double turn, you would be the one who's controlling both what shuts off and what turns on, which gives the double turn some extra power in a system where we've kind of been trying to discourage the double turn for a while now. So, and it's kind of like that Archeon ability that happens in Slaves to Darkness, where he can see who's going to take the first turn, second turn. You're getting to see what objectives are even on in the first place. And this happens before you choose your battle tactics, of course. So, I don't know. I think that people, once they get a handle on how that turning on and turning off thing works, it could actually become quite a popular mission, as long as people are okay with the fact that it's randomized a bit. But I would say it's less random than Realmstone Cache in that sense.
But Realmstone Cache feels more fair to me because you've only got the 2 objectives, right? So regardless of your builds, you're always going to be able to fight for at least 1 or even 2 objectives quite easily. Whereas here, you kind of feel the need to spread out your force often and a lot. And certain armies are just punished for that, and now you're also not even sure that you're going to get the payoff that you want from it. Is that a cool concept? Yes, but then again, I also feel like it's almost a different game.
Sure, but like we were saying about maybe it coming down to about the battle, we're not necessarily getting all the battle tactics, and that's a good thing. Why do you need to be able to get all of the objectives? You know, what if they're all turned off, and then you're in this weird situation where now you're actually just trying to manage the kind of shitstorm that was created by them getting turned all off. Yeah. Also, this is clearly the best mission for teleporters, I think. Yes. Because if your objective gets turned off, you're not getting points from it,
that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and those two objectives that are furthest apart from each other, that's actually pretty easy to teleport over there and expect them not to have been able to spread out enough to protect you from getting on that objective. Yeah. Of course, keep in mind that those corner objectives only have a 6-inch radius. They're a quarter of the size of the normal surface area that you would have for a normal objective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's just that let's just imagine that it's just 5 objectives and there's no turning on or off. It's quite difficult already here to fight over those objectives because sometimes if you get overpowered, you really need to spread your army out in certain situations. And now with the turning off and on, you get surprised by those situations more often than not, I think. Or even if it's not more often than not, it will happen at some point. And then even if you've played tactically well and you've planned and you understand how this on and off works, you can still just fail the roll and then you lose because of several bad dice rolls.
Well, yeah, but keep in mind also that you only roll for the ones that in your turn that you control that are active at the end of the turn, and then in your turn that you control that are or that you're standing on that are inactive at the beginning of the turn. So you can also mitigate things that way. Imagine you had the kind of army that could keep any of these getting turned off, right? Because they can only get turned off if someone controls them. If you had the kind of denial army that could keep people from even getting on your objectives, the ones on your side of the field, if you want to call it, even though they're equally spread out, but you designate certain objectives as ones that you're going to hunker down on and protect. As long as no one's on them, they stay active, and then you could try to deny things. I think there's a denial game here too about maybe you don't even want to step on an objective, because remember, holding one, doing 1, 2 more is largely dependent on you don't need all 5 of them to win this. You only need to have more than they do.
Yeah.
You have 2.
3.
And if you if you have 2 and they have 1, then you've got it.
Yeah.
Or if you got 1 and they got 0.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know? So, and they could end up getting burned by this randomness of having chosen to step on an objective that they didn't actually need, and it gets turned off, and then they're screwed having to walk around. I do think this one will reward really good risk takers who can make really good risk taking choices. And that's what Warhammer is with our dice rolls. Yes, we've added another risk taking element, but there is a certain amount of strategy behind the risk that you take here. It's not just blind risk. It's not like every objective is getting rolled for every single turn.
No, I don't necessarily mind the risk taking part, and I don't mind the dice roll. I mind that a lot of weight rests on one dice roll. And that's also why I probably didn't like the Phoenix Stone at first, and I still don't really like Fueled by Gurish Rage, because there's just too much effectiveness of your army or of your point scoring, or whatever that the case is in that scenario, that's resting on one single dice roll. I don't mind as much if you're risking it, like, let's say, a full attack of 10 dice, because then you still have I don't have to explain dice to you. It's just the weight is more evenly spread out among those 10 dice than it is on one dice roll. But that's maybe just my personal preference. I would love to play this mission against you and just show me how fun it is.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just making my argument. I like it. And that my opinion would be totally different if every single objective got rolled for every single turn, regardless of what you chose to do.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I think because you get to choose whether you even control it in the first place makes a difference. You can choose to walk off of it, so that technically if you walk off it, you still control the inactive one, so you have to roll for it. But you can at least get that GC off of it, or never step on it in the first place to begin with, and just play a denial game. And still just get enough to make sure that you've got one more than they do to get full points.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
Okay. I think this is the last one. Yeah. Position over power. So starting from the 4th round, the flank objectives are removed. Score extra when GCs are controlling on the flank. This is very clean. I feel like it's a very fair mission in every stage of the game. You know what's going to happen. The deployment zones are quite big. Again, very easy to score Desecrator lands here. Again, you are rewarded for having fast GCs, or teleporting ones at least, because I did find it difficult to get more than 2 objectives here. In most cases, because if one part of your army is moving on one flank, you usually can't afford to spread them out on the completely opposite side of the board and also defend your home objective as well. So for me, it usually turns out to in a choice where you just have to decide what way am I going to split to.
Yeah, this is another one that really benefits teleporting armies. And it's reverse Realmstone Cache with less randomness. So teleporting a GC over to the side. Now, this is the problem is a lot of people do it for the Tunnel Master, but that usually means you only have use the teleport. So then that GC is kind of screwed for coming back. But if you have a GC like hint hint Knight Zephyros in Stormcast, who's only 100 points and is amazing for this, who can jump over there and then jump back, and keep doing it every turn, you're in a good place for this. Or just a unit like Tree Revs or something that can do it. Yeah. Obviously, your deep striking armies, they can deep strike off the board edge or something, and then just progress inward as they move. That's pretty good too. Mm-hmm. I like that it tightens up at the end there and forces everyone to come together.
Yeah.
I like this one a lot. In fact, in general with these missions, I'm more positive than negative for sure. They even cleaned up some of the old ones to make sure them less feel bad.
The rules pack is really good. The mission pack is really good. I don't think there's one mission that I would exclude from a tournament 100%. There are some, as we've noticed before, that I'm less inclined to include, but all of them are actually really good. There's some standouts for me. I would definitely say there's at least 6 very clean and fair ones like this one, and then you've got varying degrees of a little bit of randomness or risk taking, but nothing extraordinarily unbalanced or anything.
Yeah, and there's also an argument for tournaments because we don't have a chess like ELO system where we everyone's ranked and then your matchups at the beginning of a tournament are based off of your strength of schedule you've played in your life or your season even. Mm-hmm. That first game is always random, and what ends up happening is I could see some of these more random missions being great for a first game to help level the playing field for some new player that's having to play against some seasoned guy that was going to kick his ass. And now at least maybe the points differential is not going to be so extreme if the dice rolls go in your favor. It's just for the same kind of reason that the double turn I still think is a good part of the game. I know a lot of people don't agree, but I like the double turn. And so maybe you save the more consistent and predictable ones for the last game because no one wants to have worked their way up to the top table and then get totally denied because of some random dice roll like for Twists and Turns. But if Twists and Turns is the first one, or Realmstone Cache or something with more variability in it, I think that's kind of cool.
But you could also argue that if the random one is a way to allow a beginning player to get more of an advantage than they should, that they get paired with an opponent that's also above their rank in the second game, for example.
Yeah, I get what you mean. The thing is, the differential system maxes out.
Yeah.
So if you were going to get crushed 20-0 your first game anyway, and it pushes you even more that way, then no, it doesn't change. It only changes it if you were going to be kind of middling and tight, and then it really changes the middle of the spectrum, not the extremes.
Yeah.
If it swings out of your favor, if it swings in your favor, it makes it more middling, which is good for that first round. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but that's
to conclude, the new GHB has allowed different units to shine as it should. I think that's the whole point of the seasons, I guess. It empowers certain armies more than others. We've discussed this at length in this video as well. I do feel you get a little bit more mileage out of your Galician champions now, thanks to them not being able to get sniped. You mentioned that it's not that big of a deal. I do agree with you, but there are definitely certain armies that really rely on certain buffs from their Galician champions, and they get to enjoy that for a longer period of that time now. I also feel like they nailed the balance within this season much more than in the previous one. Both with the rule set and the mission pack, I think they really what's the English word I'm looking for? They succeeded in what they wanted to do here.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think this is my favorite rules pack we've had in 3rd edition.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's really good. I love it. I wish times would have been happier and we would have come together by now and played more, Ryan. But in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we did get to play last time I saw you. We did get to play 3 games back to back.
Yeah, that was fun and intense, but I liked it actually. It was not as taxing as I thought it would have been, because at the end of the tournament I was exhausted. But when we did the practice games, it's way more chill, right? And you get to learn and discuss tactics and all that kind of stuff. It was way more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Ryan, for accompanying me on this ride. It is quite a lengthy video, so please like and share and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Also, let us know in the comments what mission is your favorite. Do you think Ryan's right about take what's theirs, or are you more into the GC grand strategies here? How do you feel about this season? Please do let us know. And if you want to discuss any of this in more detail, we also have a Discord that is quite active, especially on the Luneth side of things. And you can talk to me and Ryan there, and also a lot of other very clever people. So see you in the next one. Thank you and bye-bye.